All right. So in this lecture, I'm just going to be talking about the exchange rates and then currency devaluation. And basically, starting off, we're going to be talking about the exchange rates. So what is an exchange rate? An exchange rate is essentially just the transfer of one currency into another currency. And why would you want to do this? Well, for an example, it would be you want to buy something in England and their currency goes by euros. And so to do something like that, you have to exchange your USA currency, so the dollars, into a euro. And that's what an exchange rate is. It's to tell you how much your dollar is in the euro dollar. And so basically, the market for the foreign exchange brings together the demanders of dollars and the suppliers of dollars. So if you want to exchange your euros into dollars, this is how you would do it. And the equilibrium price is the exchange rate. So that tells you how much $1 is worth in another currency. And for this example, they're talking about the dollar measured in wons. This also goes to euros, pesos, wons, yens, any other currency. So here's a knowledge check. So we're just going to apply the currency exchange into how to actually use it and how it actually works. So say you want to buy office equipment from England, but the cost is £2,800. If the exchange rate is $1.92, how much will it cost in dollar terms? So all you would do here is £2,800 multiplied by 1.92, and that should give you around $5,376. So here you can see it's kind of steep. £2,800 and the US dollar is $5,376. That's a big exchange rate. And so what determines the exchange rates? So seeing here, you can see this is the Chinese yuan, and right now it's sitting around 6.5, but then it started decreasing slightly, and then all of a sudden it exploded up here to one US dollar was equivalent to roughly 6.8 Chinese yuans. And in the next slide, it'll talk about why this happened. And you can see here in April of 2022, the Chinese government locked down the economy to slow down the spread of COVID. And so looking back here, you can see that in around April, the lockdown happened and the US dollar appreciated. So this means that the Chinese consumers weren't buying as many products as they were used to because of this lockdown. They weren't allowed to go out to the stores. They weren't allowed to buy anything. And this kind of made them think, okay, what am I going to do with my money? So they started buying US dollars, which ultimately raised the demand of the dollar, but there wasn't a lot of supply for it. So it appreciated the US dollar, making the exchange rate more. And now we're going to talk about currency devaluation. Currency devaluation is good, and it can also be bad. So in this example, they're talking about golf, and this doesn't have to be just golf. It applies to every other product, and this goes into like imports and exports. So this example is talking about golfing in Mexico compared to golfing in the US. And if the Mexican peso were to have a devaluation, meaning the peso is less than the US dollar, that means more people in the US are going to buy US or Mexican golf in this example. This can apply basically to food, phones, cars. Doesn't really matter. But all that means is you're going to be able to export more from Mexico because it's cheaper to buy products in Mexico because of the devaluation, meaning Mexico is going to be exporting more to other countries. So they're going to have a surplus of exports, but importing is going to become harder because the peso is not worth as much. You're going to have to pay way more than you'd have to than if you were a foreign country trying to buy products from Mexico. And this hurts the Mexican consumers for the fact that the peso isn't worth as much. They can't just spend their peso how they usually would on foreign products. So an example I would think about would be you have a $10 phone case in the US, which is $10 to just the US consumers, which is pretty normal, pretty average. But say you had 15 pesos, which would be equivalent to $1, you'd have to pay $150 or 150 pesos to buy that phone case. Now say the currency devaluation happens to the peso. It falls in value, meaning now for $1 US, you have to pay 20 pesos. So now that $10 phone case isn't 150 pesos, it's now 200 pesos. That's going to make the consumer in Mexico not want to buy anything from out of the domestic country because it's more expensive, which means they're not going to be importing things from the U.S. for the fact that it is more expensive. But they will export more things because it's cheaper for the U.S. to buy their products. This slide talks about the domestic supplier and the foreign consumers are benefited by currency devaluation, but they're hurt because domestic consumers, the Mexican consumers, aren't going to be able to buy from these foreign suppliers because it's way too expensive for them. And that's all.